Welcome back to Table for Two, the podcast where it's never quiet, the coffee's never hot for long, and life gets talked about like you're already part of the family.
Hi, we're Jason and Nicole Barnett, a married ministry couple doing our best to live a grace-filled, down-to-earth life in the middle of Appalachia. Every episode, we invite you to pull up a chair, laugh a little, and lean into some honest conversations.
And this episode, man, this one's personal.
Yeah, we're talking about parenting in the church, in Appalachia, and just in this upside-down world. And spoiler alert, parenting ain't for sissies.
This is Table for Two.
Through storms and swallowed our noise, church keys in hand, coffee and mugs, our lives held together by grace and a few hugs. They said she submits, we said we both do. It's not about ladders, it's me and you, serving the kingdom in aprons and jeans, laugh lines and calloused hands and holy routines. At this table for two, there's room for you. Pull up a chair, we'll tell the truth. From love and faith with the side of faith-filled talk.
All right, so before we dive into the wild world of raising little humans, here's your warm-up question. What is one parenting rule you swore you would never break that you now break all the time?
All right, before I give my answer, I just want you, as listeners, to know we want you to answer this question too, so be sure to follow us on Facebook and put your answers in the comments.
Yes.
So for me, I remember when I was younger, we would watch home movies.
Yeah.
And for those young people that are watching, they actually would take cameras to events and record them on this big black thing called a VHS tape. And then they would put them in VCR, and you could watch them. But I remember watching, and it'd be like my older brother playing in a Little League game or something, and you could just hear my dad, like, being the football dad in the background. You know, really vocal and upset about things. Maybe not at the referee, but, really at my brother for, missing a cut on a play or almost scoring a touchdown and fumbling the ball on the 5-yard line because his hips were bigger than his arms and knocked the ball out. But I always swore to myself I wouldn't be that dad. Like I would just be able to sit there in the stands, enjoy the game. And then my son Ben decided to play basketball, and I ended up coaching for that. And and when I say playing basketball here in our county, fully, the way they do it is kindergarten through second grade, they don't have to dribble it or anything like that. They can just run the ball up the court as much as they want and then shoot it. We're supposed to encourage them to dribble, but it just doesn't happen. And but I was very much the dad. I looked at Ben, my son, and said, "You are dribbling the ball up the court. I don't care if anybody else is doing it or not doing it. You're doing it." Probably because he's part Hoosier too, and we're living in UK Wildcat country. We got to show him that we Hoosiers do a little bit different. So that was one thing. And then same when he played flag football. I remember there was one game where I wasn't coaching. I was just there as dad. And I had to go. The refs were having a really rough game calling this flag football game, and so I had to go stand on the hillside to keep my mouth shut, which didn't do us any good because the other parents got vocal and got us a 15-yard penalty anyway. But shout out to the Little League refs out there. We do appreciate you. But sometimes we as parents, it's our kids. We want them to have a good time, and we want the game to be fair. And sometimes it just doesn't look that way from our perspective. But that's me. I'm not the quiet sports parent that I wanted to be. I'm very vocal. I always end up coaching or helping in some way because I just can't sit still. I have to. I'm up and down trying to give words of encouragement. So, but you?
Well, one rule that I had that I now break regularly is I had always sworn that our kids were not going to be drinking caffeine very often.
Oh yes, I remember this phase.
Partaking in caffeine, and I wanted to be one of those crunchy moms that did a lot more natural things, and caffeine was just a no-go. But there was one day where Jason and we went out to McDonald's just because it was, I don't know, we were hungry and we had 5 minutes before we had to turn around and go to church, so we hit up McDonald's and I got a large Coke, and I was carrying my daughter inside, my oldest Jaden. And she was about 9 months old at the time, and she started chewing on the straw. And I'm thinking, she's just chewing on the straw. She doesn't know how to drink from a straw. I've not taught her to drink from a straw yet. I've not worked on her with that that with her. And I set her down and I realized my Coke is really light.
I remember this.
And turns out that my 9-month-old daughter drank half of my large Coke from McDonald's. And I realized right then and there it was pretty much all for naught. A few months later, we ended up going to visit Jason's family out in Indiana, and the first thing his grandma did was fill up her bottle with Pepsi.
That's how my grandma wins kids over and becomes influencers in their lives.
Yeah.
Through pop and Oreos.
Yeah, now by that point she was already a year old. But yeah, she filled up her bottle with Pepsi, handed her an Oreo, and my daughters followed her around like a little lost puppy ever since. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so now we don't care if our kids have Pepsi, Coke, or even coffee. We regularly make Dunkin' runs now.
Yes. Well, so let's get into it here. Parenting and ministry is a calling inside of a calling. Mm-hmm. You're trying to be faithful to your family and your church at the same time, and it doesn't always go smoothly.
No, it does not. And that's especially true when you're doing it in a rural community where everyone knows your kids. Your kids' report cards, their snack preferences, and maybe your business too. Yeah.
To give you an idea, anytime we go to the grocery store, we usually run into at least one, if not 5 of the kids' school teachers. And my oldest, Jaden, loves people. And she always makes a beeline to go hug them.
Yeah.
Things like that.
That happened in Walmart today, actually.
Did it really? Yeah. So one of the things about raising kids in ministry is not so much our expectations on the kids, but sometimes churches have expectations on kids. They expect them to be perfect, to know all the Bible stories and to dress the part of the pastor's kid and really to be a leader.
Yeah, and when they don't really measure up, the church people can be more vocal than we as parents would like.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes, our oldest daughter is very talented when it comes to singing.
Yeah.
And she's still learning how to dress properly for a Sunday morning. Like we do give her pointers and tell her things she should do, like brush her hair, take a shower, put on a dress, and things like that. But
or at least nice clothes, like not necessarily a dress.
Yeah,
but,
and
I mean, Mom doesn't wear a dress, so
yeah, that's true. But it doesn't always work out that way. And sometimes there are comments from people that are more concerned about how she looks than about the fact that this is a 11-year-old girl getting up there and singing her heart out for Jesus. But again, the expectation's a little different for her because she's our child.
Yeah.
So we have to learn to deal with those things.
Yeah.
And then also, our middle child is our son, Ben, and he's 9 years old, and he's ginger like his mom. And so with being a ginger, right, the joke is gingers don't have souls, but at the same time as that, sometimes he has a little bit of an attitudinal issue.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So him having he'll have these temper tantrums in the middle of Sunday school or children's church or sometimes even the middle of the sanctuary, and trying to both extend grace to my son as well as guide him in a way that is appropriate behavior and is kind of key there, but also trying to point out to the church people that he needs grace too, just as much as any of these other little kids that we're reaching in the community.
Yeah. And we have to be careful to not overlook the pastor's kids and just assume they're being spiritually fed because they're in the pastor's home. And to an extent they are. They're in church services all the time.
Yeah, but actually it's kind of like when you're just surrounded by food constantly, sometimes you just don't want to eat and you're not going to get the healthy stuff.
Yeah. And like our oldest is just now going into youth group. And so we had youth group and we were playing a Bible trivia game, and there was a question that she was not able to answer in that trivia game, which was very obvious to Nicole and I, and maybe the other youth leader that was there helping with that. But I mean, perhaps that we it was kind of, for me, it was kind of shocking that our daughter didn't know the answer to it. But I'm trying to remember what the question was. I think it was like how many books of the Bible are in the New Testament, and she didn't know the number. Does that mean we failed as a parent? No, because I know we told her that before, and she's been going to Bible studies and Bible school.
And she has answered that question the right way before. She just couldn't think of it in that moment.
Exactly. So again, don't always just assume because they're the pastor's kid that you don't have to teach them the Bible or go over the familiar Bible stories with them, because they're kids.
Yeah. The thing is Jason and I, we're nerds when it comes to the Bible. We love the Bible. We've been passionate about Scripture for years and years and years. But let's face it, our children have their own personalities and their own interests, and sometimes the Bible just isn't as high ranking on their interest list as it is for mom and dad.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that we have done that has really helped us is Nicole has this rule for the church people that they have aunt and uncle / grandparent rights. Meaning, if they want to give our kid a piece of candy or a cookie, or there's one lady in our church who likes to hand our son a $5 bill because she just loves him to death and he loves her too. We tell them they're allowed to do that, right? They don't have to come and ask us for permission. Now if they're wanting to pick them up and take them someplace, or
obviously we need to know where our kids are going.
Yeah, and make a plan for that schedule because our lives are busy. But it really does cut down on a lot of unnecessary discussions and tension between us and the church folks in that department.
Because they understand that we do trust them with our children, and so they kind of get the privilege of being the spoiling people, the ones that are just able to unconditionally love on our kids. And then when it comes to correction and everything, they come to us and we handle any correction that needs to happen.
Yes. And so in a way, again, it's how the church is supposed to operate. When I was a youth pastor, one thing I always would tell parents is my job as a youth pastor is not to go between you and your kid. It's to come alongside both of you. Parents will often ask me, well, why does my kid listen to you and not me? And I said, it's because I'm the youth pastor. Your mom and dad.
Because we're a different voice.
We're a different voice. I'm not saying anything different than you.
Yeah, and the thing is it's the same way with our children. We have, they hear our voices all the time. Sometimes they need to hear it from another person that they can trust. And so what we're trying to do is facilitate trust between the church people and our children.
Now, and the last thing I'll add on this too is every church is different. If you're a ministry couple in this, every church is different with how they're going to interact with your kids. There was one church where Nicole stated our rule about the aunt and uncle grandparent rights, and one person spoke up and said, well, does that mean I get to spank your child?
And I was like, no, aunt and uncle and grandparent don't get to spank your kid.
Yes, they come get us when that kind of punishment is necessary. But I will say this about our current place: they love our kids. They spoil them rotten. They're always doing things to bless them and make them feel welcome and appreciated, and that makes our job a lot easier because we know at the end of the day our kids are loved and cared for.
And let's face it makes it easier for us to love the congregation.
Absolutely. Now we've talked about this a little bit already, but we're living in Estill County, Kentucky, which is a wonderful place to live. This is a great place. So many wonderful people we've met. A heart for helping people and helping one another. I'm not going to go out and say it's like Mayberry from the Andy Griffith Show.
No, not quite.
But it's definitely a place where everybody knows your name, and
more like Cheers.
Yes, they know your name. They know who you are. They know who your family is. There's definitely a closeness about it, and that's good. Mm-hmm. That is good. It's a place where you can let your kids out and let them ride their bikes a little bit. We have a park right across the street, so there's always kids over there playing and doing things. But there's still some important things about safety nets we have to keep up right now. Because, again, our oldest is 11, our middle child's 9, and the youngest is 7. So there are things that are important for us as parents to remember. Is one, when we let them go to the park, we go with them.
Yeah, well, the park has a rule that you can't go, or you can't leave your children unattended if they're under 12, and none of our kids are 12 yet.
Yes, but at the same time too, I just don't, just because it's a community where you know everybody and everybody knows you doesn't doesn't mean you know everybody and they know you. If you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. Everybody has secrets.
And so if you want to protect your kids, make sure you're at a place where you're available and approachable and can be there for them.
Because let's face it, sometimes when you think you know someone, the danger of the small town is sometimes when you think you know someone, you don't see the red flags, you don't see the warning signs. And so, and I mean, I can't even imagine how many times I've heard, well, that person would never do something like that, and then they do.
Yeah, exactly. And so in some ways you got to make sure you're protecting yourself, you're protecting your child, and protecting the other person by just being present and being vigilant. Yeah. Now, in the area we live, there's a lot of people who have gone to college or been successful in life. But at the same time, too, it's also an area where people struggle. Mm-hmm. They're working one or more jobs just trying to make ends meet. And
then we have a lot of homeless in the area as well.
Yeah, so that adds some different dynamics to things. So I remember when we first got here, there were some kids we were working with that they had never been to Golden Corral before.
Yeah. And
for us, Sunday afternoons, and if you're a ministry couple, you understand this, there is absolutely no time to cook dinner for after church on Sunday.
No, there is not.
There's not. Like, you could, even if you put it in the crock pot, it doesn't always work out timing wise. So we tend to eat out for lunch, and so and also for us that provides some great ministry opportunity where we can visit with other families, visit with other church members, and really strengthen those bonds that we have with one another. But I remember there's a group of kids that were with us, and they had never been to Golden Corral before, and it was a big deal for us to take them. Mm-hmm. The parents were okay with it, but at the same time too, it was a different experience, and so that was kind of an eye-opening thing.
Yeah, but I mean, back to kind of education and stuff like that. Even like the education that a child or that anybody has is a little different here. I've kind of noticed. We have a science teacher that, he's teaching what the science curriculum requires him to teach. And I mean, like, he's really educated in it. He knows what he's talking about. And of course, my daughter loves that because she's a little science nerd. But it's been interesting because there's actually been quite a lot of outrage from his teaching evolution, which from, in any other community, it'd be, it's
pretty normal.
It's normal. But here, like, it was kind of...
There's a lot of pushback.
Yeah. And so even the kids who are educated, they've kind of had like a very different education experience from the people outside of the area.
Mm-hmm. And for us, that was one of the reasons why we chose the public school route. You can homeschool your kids, and there's nothing wrong with that, and I applaud homeschool parents.
We don't have the patience.
We don't have the patience for that. But the other side of it, too, is my kids encounter different ways of thought from us when they go into the public school system.
Yeah.
So that the theory of evolution is one of those to an extent. And that's okay with us, because what that does is it opens the doors for us to have conversations with our child about things that they're experiencing here and walk them through it. What does the Bible say about creation? So what do we do when our teacher is teaching something different? We can ask honest questions of what the teacher is teaching us in a respectful manner, but also allow that to help shape what we believe through faith. Those two things are not at odds with each other. It's just something you have to navigate. And so it's enabled us to help teach our kids to navigate those tough conversations and know they're safe to come to us and ask us those questions.
Yeah, because, I mean, they're going to have those questions eventually, so why not start it now? Mm-hmm. And start give them the courage to ask those questions now. And then as they grow, we can continue to navigate those.
There's different things that come along.
Yeah. But speaking of navigating the different things, I mean, technology.
Yeah, technology is something that's been interesting. And so, because we are so busy a lot, and our kids are starting to get involved in other things, and so where we're serving at, we live on site, right? The church, we live in an apartment above our church's fellowship hall. And the fellowship hall is right next to the sanctuary. But then on the other side of that building is where my office is at.
Yeah.
So
we call it the compound.
Yeah, it's the Ravnas compound. And so while we're home a lot, while we're on site a lot, there's often times where Nicole or I are down in the fellowship hall, or I'm down in the office, or Nicole's over here. And so it was important for us, for our kids to be able to communicate with us.
Yeah.
And so there is a church phone up there. But again, they would have to memorize phone numbers, or we have to make sure the list was hanging up. And our youngest, Emrys, loves to draw pictures and place them on the refrigerator.
And we can't even begin to count the times that she's covered up the phone numbers or taken them off the fridge because she wants to hang up a picture using that magnet.
Yeah, they'll fall off the fridge and float into the abyss underneath it, right? And you don't find it until it's covered in red Kool-Aid or Cheeto crumbs.
The trash can is right by the fridge.
Yes. And so when Jaden turned 9, we got her a cell phone. No, it was when she turned 10. When she turned 10, we got her a cell phone. And that way she could communicate with us. And we made sure she had phone numbers for some church members who would be great in a situation if she can't get a hold of us. And she has a lot of fun with that. She texts some of those members pretty regularly. And our son Ben, he's getting ready to turn 10 in November. We already got him a phone, but that's because our provider was having a great deal. So we got him a phone a little bit early. But again, the same thing. We connected him with some of those other church members, and he texts. And actually, what I love about it is he texts them, a lot of them almost every day, saying hello and ask them how their day is going. So that's
precious.
And I've had several members tell me how much that they appreciate that, and they love the fact that Ben sends them a message.
Yeah.
And
our little 9-year-old's already ministering.
Yeah. But at the same time, too, we've had to put up some safeguards.
Yeah. And one of the things that we adopted, I'm going to go ahead and just reference who I got the idea from. There's this TikToker named Mama Cusses. I don't know her actual name, but her TikTok handle is Mama Cusses, and she's got an amazing parenting advice. And one of the things that she talked about was how she handles technology with her kids. And basically it's you have a cell phone, and I can look at your phone at any time. I can make sure that you're not doing anything sketchy or you're not getting abusive texts or anything from anybody. She goes through the apps. She makes sure that that her child has only apps that she's approved and but basically if she's not doing anything sketchy, then she's not going to get herself she's not going to be required to show her cell phone because there's never been any reason. And we kind of gave the same set of rules to our oldest when she got a cell phone. And I think I took her phone once, and that wasn't even related to anything she was doing on her phone. She was distracted. She was playing on her phone when she should have been cleaning her room or something.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and even then we have some things like they were not allowed to get on YouTube for a long time until we could find ways to make sure we had set up safeguards and protections for our kids on YouTube.
Yeah. And
we knew what they were watching and looking at. When they're playing games online, they can't add people as friends unless they tell us who they are. And there's some games that you can play where just anybody can chat with you. And we try to tell them, be careful of people.
The rule is they can't share anything personal. They can't share their age, where they live, even their gender. They're discouraged, highly discouraged from that, although sometimes the avatars give that away.
Yes. So, again, technology is one of those crazy things. Our son Ben recently, he saved up his allowance and the $5 that the lady at church kept giving him until he had enough where he bought himself like a 70-inch TV, right? No, it wasn't 70. I'm sorry, it was
30 inch. That was a far cry. It was
Yeah, I
35 inch
exaggerated.
TV or something
There you
like
go. That's the the fisherman in me saying, look at the size of this. And it keeps growing every time I tell the story. So next time I tell the story to you, it's probably going to be a 100-inch TV.
that. It'll be the size of the house.
The size of the house. But anyway, Ben bought himself this TV, and he has it in his room. And so that created a little bit of challenges at first because he got it in the middle of the school year, which they're out of school now. And he would want to stay up all night watching his TV. We had to get to a point where we would take his remote or unplug his TV so he would go to sleep. But again, it's one of those things where you're learning to balance those things out.
Yeah.
We could say no to all those things, and maybe that would help Ben in a lot of ways and our other kids. But the question is, are we protecting them,
or are we just making it easier for us?
Yes. Because the thing is, the Bible tells us we are to train up a child in the way they should go.
But you can't train them if you're not actually giving them the tools that they're going to be using later.
Right. And that's what we're teaching them to do. We're teaching them how to think, make decisions now, so that way when they encounter these different things in life, they'll be able to make them in the moment.
Yeah.
Learning that when you have to get up to go to work in the morning, it's probably not a good idea to stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning trying to use AI to create a song, right? You want to go to bed because you have to get up at like 7:30, 8 o'clock. You want to be well rested. But those are things you learn over time, right? You don't figure that out in an instant.
No.
And so it's important that our kids learn to develop those things now instead of when they are out on their own and they're floundering.
Yeah.
Well,
and then technology, like especially the social media side of things, it's one of those things that sometimes when you're overly sheltered, those things go crazy. Like you go crazy with those things when you're no longer under mom and dad's watchful eye preventing you from having those.
Yeah.
And so I would rather that they kind of have their immature moments now where we can be there and we can again have access to those devices whatever. And that's another rule that we have is no questions asked. I say I want to see your device, you hand it to me. It's not a why, it's a now. And so anytime we want to see those devices, we can look and make sure that they're not sharing information, they're only chatting with people that are safe and they're being appropriate. So
yeah, yes. Because again, think about when you learn to swim. Now, when I learned how to swim, my grandma had a pool in the backyard growing up, and my dad kind of just picked me up and tossed me in the water.
But do you like swimming now?
No, I don't like to swim. I'm like a cat. I prefer not to be wet. But what my point with that was this. I was learning to swim in a pool that was 4 feet deep. All I had to do was put my legs down and stand up. But Dad was there, wanted to make sure I got in the water to learn how to move my body about in a way to keep myself above the water, but also the fact that I could stand up in this water, that it was possible to stay afloat. But so much about parenting is that in a sense, right? Where when they at some point our kids are going to grow up and they're going to leave the house at some point. Now, if you send your kids to a public school, they're going to go to a public school. That's them jumping into the pool water. But if they have to wait until their adulthood to jump out into the pool water for the first time, well, you're not there to be with them and walk them through it. It's going to be a lot different than it is when they know you're standing on the deck of the pool.
Yeah. Well, see, I was viewing it more in the sense of like I learned to swim, literally with like a lifeguard right there in the water with me, teaching me how to swim. And I kind of feel like that's what we're doing with the kids is we're in the water with them.
Yes.
We're equipping them by showing them how to do it as they're doing it too.
Yes. So perhaps it's a somewhat of a combination of both.
Yeah.
Right? There are times where because think about a lifeguard. They sit in that big chair above, and they're watching.
Yeah.
They're ready to jump in at any moment when someone's in trouble. But there are also moments where they are in the water because that person needs them in the water to save them. And that's kind of our role as parents. We are lifeguards to our kids.
Yeah.
Ready to jump in when they need us to jump in, and ready to just sit in the chair and watch and be present. I think that's one of the things I've learned so far about parenting is that, again, we're going back to the verse of train a child in the way they should go. Right? That verse is important. We're instilling in them the values of, having faith in Jesus and trusting him with the things that you don't know. But also not being afraid to ask him questions to help you grow in that understanding. But also I'm doing it in a sense where I know at some point I have to turn him loose.
Yeah.
Recently I was teaching Emrys how to ride her bike. Right, she's the last kid that I've got on 2 wheels. And we did something different with Emrys. The other 2 kids, Jaden.
They had training wheels.
Yeah, and so when Jaden tried to go to the 2-wheeler, it was kind of a different experience. Ben struggled a little bit with it. But with Emrys, we found this little bike where she learned to balance. It didn't have pedals or anything, but she sat on it and was able to keep both feet on the ground, and she could pick them up and roll on the 2 wheels, but she could always put her feet down to balance herself. And one of the things we discovered was that little tool was so helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Because when it came time for her to learn to ride the 2-wheeler, or the big kid bike,
the only thing she had to learn to do was pedal.
That was it. We were trying to teach her how to pedal, but even then, as she was pedaling, I noticed,
she knew how to balance.
She knew how to balance, and she was starting to pedal faster than Dad could keep up with. Right? And so I had to, but that was her way of telling me, Dad, without using words, Dad, I'm ready for you to let go of the seat. Let go of the handlebars and let me try this. And she crashed a few times. And if you know Emrys, she's dramatic. But she would get back up and she would try it again. And we would start again and hit that same point and I would release her. And then now she's got it. She's got it figured out this week. And that's what training up a child in the way they should go is learning to help them that they need to pedal, learning, the steps of learning to balance, learning to pedal. But at some point, we have to let that seat go. Mm-hmm. And it's learning to do that over and over again because as their kids grow up, they're hitting these different stages, these different milestones. And I think for every kid, it's not always age-based. It's more of they let you know when they're ready for it.
Yeah.
Without even, sometimes with words and sometimes without words. And
yeah, sometimes you do have to just give them a push and let them try. Force them to try sometimes, but I feel like the more that you introduce them to these different ideas, the more they're going to accept the try, I guess.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm still kind of learning as a parent in ministry is we as pastors, we feel the weariness when we've had a week where we've been at church
all the time,
all week. Yes. Right? We've been there every night. We feel
like we may as well just crash in the Sunday school room.
Yes, because there was church event after church event, or service after service, and you and I feel that weariness. But some of the times, I forget that my kids are experiencing that too.
Yeah. And let's face it, they didn't choose this life.
They didn't choose it. And so learning to recognize when they're weary, and sometimes they just need a break.
Yeah.
Just like the rest of us do. They need to be able, every once in a while, Ben, Sundays, going to children's church is not the right option for him. Sometimes it's just sitting in the sound booth with Mom as she's trying to run the slides for me. Or you up in the sound booth as you're running slides for me. Yeah. It's learning to catch those rhythms and recognize that before it hits. Because again, you push your kid too far and they're going to come to a place where they melt down. Yeah. And it's not their fault. It's not always your fault either. It's just life. Yeah.
And they're tired.
Yeah, learning to recognize their weariness. So, other parents, if you're listening to this, life has its different rhythms, its up and downs. Don't beat yourself up too much. You're going to make mistakes. But the question we have to ask ourselves, are we willing to learn from those and do things differently?
Yeah, so whether you've got toddlers in the pews, teenagers rolling their eyes at the altar calls, or just big dreams of someday being a parent, I mean, we want you to know that you're not alone. You're not alone in this. We struggle too.
Yeah. There's no perfect parents allowed here because perfect parents don't exist. Just honest ones. And it's the honest ones that grow and help train their kids up in the way they should go.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us on this episode of Table for Two. If you liked what you heard, share this episode with another parent who's wondering if the sippy cups and Sunday school snacks ever lead to holiness.
And hey, again, if you've got your own answer to today's warm-up question, or you just need a parenting win, come hang out with us on Facebook. You'll find us at the Table for Two podcast.
Our new episodes will drop every Thursday, and we're grateful every time you pull up a chair.
Grace and peace, friends.
Through storms and swallowed our noise, church keys in hand, coffee in mugs, our lives held together by grace and a few hugs. They said she submits, we said we both do. It's not about ladders, it's me and you, serving the kingdom in aprons and jeans, lifelines and calloused hands and holy routines. At this table for two, there's room for you. Pull up a chair, we'll tell the truth, from love and faith with the side of her face.